Welcome to Mindset Mavericks. I'm Jon Coogan, and today we're joined by Carly Pepin. So the question we're looking at today is if you're struggling to find alignment between your goals and your life's purpose, Carly Pepin's strategies help reveal how to reframe challenges and master your mindset to design a fulfilling future. So thank you very much for being here. Really appreciate you joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John.
So a little bit about yourself. I'm going to give you a quick intro, which if I make any mistakes or it's not going to do you justice, feel free to jump in at any time. But yourself, you're an international speaker, a consultant, and interestingly, a human behavior specialist who's helped countless entrepreneurs, business leaders turn perceived flaws into stepping stones for success. And I know that's something that most people struggle with, is trying to overcome some of those perceived flaws. So I really want to dig into that today. What I'd like to start off with really is to try and find out how you really got into behavioral into behavior specialist arena and find out what drove you to go into that field. So can you tell me a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely stemmed from just being stuck in my own personal challenges. I had done a lot of traditional types of therapies when I was living in the States, and nothing was working. And I really couldn't shift how I was feeling on the inside, so it was really rough. And I wound up moving to Australia thinking that would solve my problems for like a year.
Yeah.
It kind of did and it didn't. It wasn't Australia that solved my problems, but it was kind of just reconnecting in a different way, in the sense that when I got there, things got significantly worse because I realized that it wasn't the outside that was the challenge, it was the inside. And I found my first coach that specialized in human behavior at that time, and we really approached the healing process, the transformation process in a different way. And I started to see results rapidly. Like within the first 3 months, I was having insane transformations in my life and internally as well, and just feeling so much more fulfilled. So it was at that point, I just remember telling my coach, I want to do what you do.
Yeah.
Like, who do I need to know to do what you do? Yeah, we're actually still friends to this day. So she's awesome. But yeah, she changed my life for sure.
Yeah. And I think that's something that most people can probably resonate. It's trying to seek something externally to, like you say, just fill those gaps that you've got internally, whether it's relationships or substances or could be anything really, but that is definitely something that happens frequently. Can I just ask what things it was that you were feeling stuck with in that period?
Yeah, so I had some anxiety, I had some depression. I also had eating disorders, so that was pretty tricky. And then on top of that, just, day-to-day life, like I was really struggling with romantic relationships. I was struggling just with other relationships and just feeling unfulfilled at work. It was a lot. It was like a lot. I had gotten like the house and the car and the job, and nothing was the thing. And so it was a lot. I was really stressed.
Yeah. So and was it one thing in particular that kind of triggered your acknowledgement or realization about how things could be different?
Yeah. And that, when I decided to move to Australia, when I got there, the first month was incredibly challenging. And that's what really triggered where it's like, hey, it's really time to figure out something else. Because that's when I realized I thought it was all the things that were around me that was the problem. But as soon as you're there and you have all the things that you're blaming on the outside gone, and you realize like, man, I feel worse than before. I realized that those things that I were blaming were actually distracting me from like the actual pain on the inside, it's fascinating. And it's the best, obviously the best thing that ever happened to me, because that's when it was. I found my first coach by accident. Like it wasn't, who didn't even search. It just was one of those things where I looked up at the bulletin board and I was like, man, I have all that stuff. And like, she got to the other side. How'd she do that? I was like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. Typically, what are some of the behaviors that you see holding people back?
Yeah, definitely are misperceptions and comparisons, right? So we get really stuck in our misperceptions. We're seeing the world in a one-sided way, or we even want it to be one-sided, when the truth is the world has all sides. It's got challenge and support in many forms. And so when we get stuck in those perceptions, it needs to be one way, it has to be one way, we get really frustrated and really stressed out because it's not meeting up to this internal fantasy that we've created. The world is what it is. It's not going to what you want just because, you're annoyed with it. So when we shift our perceptions and can become grateful for the things that are occurring, how they're occurring, all of a sudden you become grateful for your life as it is. And The other thing that really, really nails us is comparisons, So when we're putting someone else on a pedestal and we're perceiving other people have something that we don't, we give them our authority. We take the authority away from ourselves in our own unique forms and our own values, and we give it, hand it over to someone else that we perceive has it. And we start to mimic them consciously and unconsciously. We'll start to mimic them to try to do things the way they do it. And that takes us away from things that are fulfilling to us. And that's why we start to feel more unfulfilled when we have that high level of subordination.
Yeah, I think it's kind of touching on what you said a second ago, but one of the things I definitely feel is a lot of frustrations and anger and upset is really comes from when your expectations aren't met. You expect people to react in a certain way and it doesn't meet that expectation. But yeah, I think that's definitely where some of my issues have come from in the past. But how do you start to break those patterns?
Yeah, well, it's also humbling ourselves, when we are frustrated with someone because they're not showing up the way that we thought they should. We're really frustrated because they're not showing up with the way that we do, and we think we're better. Like, we got ourselves on a pedestal, and it's humbling ourselves to know that we're not better and we're not worse. We're just different. And our way comes with its own set of challenges, and this way that your experiences comes with its own set of benefits. And so it's like when you have something where you want someone to be different, which is generally more like you, it's acknowledging that so we can humble ourselves and seeing how this other new way serves you, this way that you're thinking is bad or wrong or shouldn't be. Like, why does it help? Why does it serve you? Why is it serving the others who are using it? And when you start to look at those answers, it's humbling to realize, like, you know what? I think I actually wasn't right here. I thought I was right, and I've been pretty high on myself, and I'm not. And when you do that, the other person can do the exact same thing and it won't impact you. It won't frustrate you. It won't trigger you. In fact, you'll enjoy it. It'll just be like a normal conversation, like nothing happened. Yeah.
Yeah. And is there any practical tips you can give that helps you get into that mindset? Because it can be quite a sea change in, like, say, your mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's the thing. Whenever we're trying to change someone on the outside, that is just a direct reflection that in that moment we have a frustration with them because we're not seeing how the situation serves us, right? We're not seeing how it serves us. So that is, our emotions are the initial reaction and the trigger to give us that feedback. The other thing is we resent the very things we have in ourselves, but there are disowned parts. So we won't acknowledge that we have that to the same degree as another individual because we have guilt or shame for what we've done in the past or even present what we're doing that is the exact same or similar form. And so we'll also disown that part. And sometimes people listen to this and they'll be like, oh no, but Carly, I definitely don't do this. Every person has everything that they see on the outside inside of them. Every single person. People love when I say that you have the things you admire, but I'm like, it's a universal law. It goes for the things that you dislike too. And the more that you're blocking actually seeing the very thing that you are seeing and frustrated with in yourself, the more that I know that you have a higher level of guilt and shame for whatever you've done, And so it's not like, it's not a good or bad thing, but it's like just understanding that. It's like, give yourself a little bit of empathy. Like if you're having a hard time looking and seeing like, well, where do I actually have this very thing that's frustrating me, right? Where is it within me? It's like, just know that the harder it is to find, the more guilt and shame that you actually have harboring from whatever you've done. So our brain actually blocks it as a protective mechanism. But we clear the guilt and shame by doing the same thing with, and this is fun too, because human behavior is basically like a mathematical equation. We're not looking for something to be more positive than negative. And we're not looking for something to be more negative than positive. We're looking it to be equally positive and negative, neutral. That's a neutral state. -1 + 1 is 0, right? So I don't want -5 + 2. I want +5 + 2. I want +1, right? I want to get to 0. I want to get to neutrality because that's a true state of gratitude. That's real balance. And so when we think about that, it's reflecting on these situations. It's like, wow, do I have more positive stacked up in this moment or negative stacked up, right? And when we have guilt, it's because we have more negative association to what we've done than a positive. So in that case, you would add some benefits. You would see, and you would go and actually see, well, how did me behaving this way actually help someone, help this individual that was on the receiving end? And you'll start to diffuse the charge when you just get to that neutrality. And this is where our pride comes in as well, right? Because I was talking about before, like we sit there and we get frustrated with people because we're like, I do it better. But that's because we have more positive than negatives, right? And that's in that case, you would go and be like, okay, when I'm doing this thing that I think is so amazing and there's nothing wrong at all, and I can do no harm in this moment. What are some thoughts to these people on the receiving end? And it's really cool because it's like what you get to see is you get to gratitude, right? Because again, we just want to get to neutrality where positive equals negative. It becomes just a thing. You're not trying to be that good person or that good person you've labeled on a regular basis. You're not trying to avoid being the thing that you labeled as negative. And you're actually, this is where we get present and we just get to be. You know, people are always trying to get to that moment of presence and being, but part of the presence of being is not seeking or avoiding all these parts of yourselves or others. And that takes work. That takes work. Yeah.
And how long, just roughly, does it take you from the start of your transformation to actually feeling a bit more enlightened and being able to see things in a bit more of a neutral filter?
Yeah, it's taken me some time and I still work on it. And the cool thing is like I've gotten in the beginning, you're definitely focusing on the biggest charges, the biggest things, right? And that's really fun because you get to work on all these big wounds that are very obvious and all the biggest traumas. And then later on, it's like, man, it's kind of peeling away the onion and finding these little bits and pieces that sometimes you didn't realize had as big of an impact. And then all of a sudden you open it up and it's like, this is with my husband. He's also human behavior. So I had him help me with something last week. And we opened up Pandora's box on something that I was just like, my intuition said to work on this, but I just would have passed it off so much just because it didn't seem like it was that big of a deal. And then when we opened it, it was like Pandora's box, right? It was amazing. And so there's that dynamic where, yeah, you'll get through all the big things in the beginning, but then we peel away the layers to give yourself more permission, more opportunity to be more authentic day to day. And it does make life easier in the sense that, you know, you're not in your head as much, you know, and if you are in your head, you'll catch it more quickly and you're like, okay, let's work on this. Let's shift through this. But it's not like you're constantly in your head. Like you give yourself more permission to show up in an authentic way. You start to get used to asking yourself these questions. So in the moment, you can start to diffuse these challenges and charges like more effectively and efficiently. It really is quite helpful. I find personal development to be one of the greatest tools on this planet to assist us in moving forward in many ways, many, many ways.
I think just touching on seeing the world through a particular lens, and I think it's something I definitely experienced in various relationships, personally, professionally. And it's just trying to, like I say, have a step back, think about what's that person's intention rather than what did you hear. And that's something which isn't often done. I think quite often you can hear something, interpret it through your own lens and take it how you've perceived it. And actually, that's not the other person's intention at all. So it's definitely worth asking those clarifying questions. Say, this is what I heard. This is how I understood it. Have I got that correct? And it is just trying to get rid of some of those barriers or some of those things which are limiting you in developing those relationships because of the tainted lens you're looking at things through.
Yeah, again, it's that way where we think it should be a certain way, but this is a great example that you just gave, because if we look at our lives and we give ourselves the opportunity to reflect on who we are, right? Like I can talk about me and I can explain when I'm challenging in certain circumstances. There's very specific reasons based on my own life and my own personal challenges that I want to push someone else in this way to help them get to the other side, right? Because there's things I know, there's my unique experience. And we get mad at even like our parents and family members and individuals who are close to us, sometimes coworkers and bosses, because we're not doing that reflective awareness with them as well. You know, and sometimes it's just asking people. It's like, my parents were so hard on me. They made me study and this and that. And it was just so intense. I felt like I had to be perfect. And it's like, okay, well, let's look at why that was the case. Like, how did your dad grow up? How did your mom grow up? What was the challenges that they went through? And what we wind up uncovering is they're just trying to help them to avoid some of the biggest and most traumatic experiences that they've ever had in their life. You know, and in this case, it's about education. Sometimes it's about finances. Sometimes it's about health, right? But these are people who are like, hey, I have some foresight here. Trust me on this. I'm going to push you to get this part of life correct and get this part of life right. Because I didn't have it. You have no idea what I went through. You have no clue. We don't even ask those questions or piece that together to realize that the very thing that we considered someone was mean or rude or critical or challenging is actually love. Like, it's actually love. Someone loves you enough to push you hard enough to make sure that you can get to the other side of what they went through, and it's kind of beautiful when you see that and people see that. They get the heart opening, they get the gratitude, and all of a sudden their life doesn't seem wrong, or their childhood shifts from being this like negative perception to, wow, that was perfect for me. I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for my life.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great perspective, and it is recognizing where things that might have seemed harsh previously, you start to understand actually they were trying to help me avoid the pain that person's gone through. So yeah, I think that's a great way of looking at it. So one of the things that many of our listeners struggle with is fear of failure. So have you got any strategies that can help turn that fear into fuel for growth?
Yeah. And so our idea of failure, it's really our perception. This is, I just got this with myself, like so long, it was last month or something, or I had a good laugh. I texted my husband and I was like, I just cannot believe I just caught this. But basically, I had gone in high school. I started my first business, right? When I was 18 years old. It didn't turn out, which is fine. But, 18, you do what you can. So I started that business, didn't turn out, didn't think anything of it. Like, as far as even personal development goes, I didn't go through and like, I failed this, I lost all this money. Like, I did a little work on it, but nothing crazy, And it's funny because I started to see that failure in business became a real issue when I started to create friends that were entrepreneurs that were highly successful. And that's when it came in. It was all comparison. So I perceived myself as a failure as an entrepreneur based off of these individuals that were my friends that were successes and entrepreneurs. But the funny thing is when I had no one to compare myself to, guess what? I was like, that's just life. It's our comparisons, kind of going back to what we talked about before, that get us really caught up in how it should look. So we think that it should be this way, or we think that it should be that way. And we think that this failure that we had was not meant to be there because we've compared ourselves to one or many individuals that we've seen do something different. So first off, it's catching that a lot of this is fruited from comparisons. And then the next step to make sure that you understand why it occurred for you is to see how the failures serve you, right? Because if you go actually look and you're like, man, I really mucked this one up. Like, this one I failed hard on. It's like, well, how did that actually serve you and all the individuals involved? And again, we want to do it until we get that state of neutrality. Not that it's more positive than negative, but just that it's equal positive to negative. And that's where you're grateful. And you become grateful for actually having that failure because now you realize it's on the way instead of in the way. And when I say this too is don't get caught up in the fantasy of successes and the pride that we get around successes. Again, this is where we have this dynamic and this dichotomy in our brain where we're trying to avoid failure and seek success, right? Why would we do that? Again, this is that mathematical equation. We have success as more positives than negatives. So if you go and you look at these times when you were highly successful and you have more positive associations stacked, you're seeking that. And that's your fantasy, right? You're hooked, you're addicted to it because you have too many positives and you're not seeing the other side. The truth is that everything has both sides, every single thing on this planet. And so if you actually went and looked and took that off the pedestal where you're asking some of the drawbacks, disservices, again, until we get to neutrality, what you wind up seeing is you're like, whoa, I didn't see that before. I didn't see the challenges. And then in that state, you don't have to seek success or avoid failure. Again, you just get to exist. And you just move forward and everything's just an event. If you succeed or fail, it's just an event on the way to fulfill your mission. And that's when I say, like, we just get to be in these states when we're not seeking things or avoiding things. You just get to be and you experience it for what it is instead of getting in your head, like, I can't fail, I have to succeed, right? Get out of your head and back into your heart.
I think talking about reframing, one of the things that I've only recently started to do this, but isn't seeing failures more as a science experiment. Any failure, it's just science experiment. You try something out, see if it works, see if it gets to the conclusion that you're expecting, and if it doesn't, you just tweak things and go again. And I think it is that reframing that you're talking about that I've only recently started to see, particularly with failures. Yeah, I think one of the difficult things, particularly in 2024, where we are now, is the level of social media that's just bombarding everyone everywhere you go. Like I say, the comparisons to social media and to everyone else on social media, and what the perception is that they're up to. So how can you try and stop that comparison? What can you do to turn that volume down on comparison?
Yeah. And this is where, again, we want to find what we see on the outside, on the inside, right? Because if I'm going and I'm looking and I'm saying, this person has this and I don't, it's wisdom for you to go find it in yourself. You know, we talked about finding the challenging things in ourselves, but go find these things that you love in yourself as well. And the reason why we want to do that is because then the comparison stops. And then it almost gives you the opportunity to like just get educated from these people and learn, no matter what you're doing or watching. So if you're watching someone who's really into fitness and you're admiring them for their fitness acumen, whatever they're doing, and you don't feel like you have it, you're going to sit there and you're going to beat yourself up and you're going to try to mimic them, trying to get what they have. But the truth is you have it in your own form. So let's say you love that they wake up every day and they're dedicated to their fitness routine. Well, take a look at your life. What do you wake up every day and what are you dedicated to? You know, if you're not doing fitness, it's definitely something else, but there's something, one or few things probably, that every day you wake up and you're dedicated to the same degree they have that dedication. And the funny thing is you'll look at them and you'll be like, wow, there are certain things that I'm dedicated to that they don't even have in their life, because we're all unique individuals. And in that state, you stop comparing yourself, because now there's nothing missing between you and the other person. And the beauty of this is, again, this is where we just get present. Now that all that noise is gone and you're not like, I have to be this way, or I have to be this way, or I need to do this, and I should do this, right? You just listen, and you'll just listen to this person and you'll get the information that you want that is applicable to your life. Now it becomes a learning opportunity. And so really social media is a great opportunity for this, because it gives us like really beautiful opportunity to step into all these comparisons we have. And I like to use it too as a check-in. It's like, where am I still comparing myself? What have I shifted? What do I look at? And I'm totally fine. What do I look at? And that noise comes in my head of the shoulds and the have-tos. And I'm like, okay. I was like, all right, Carly. So we could use it as a personal development tool. Like, also, if you're using it wisely, pay attention basically to yourself, your thought processes.
Yeah, I think one thing that you did mention there is about how you want to look at people on social media, for example, and you want what they have. So for your own goals and your own drives and desires, how do you set those if it's not through comparison? What do you do to set your own goals?
Yeah, you figure out what you really, really want. The truth is if I really wanted something that someone else had, I could get it. You know, we could all get it. There's people that I talk to that say, you know, they can't afford to do some personal development stuff with me, right? They can't afford it. And if I look at their finances, they're making significantly more than a lot of the clients that I'm working with, right? I had a client on welfare one time, figure out how to pay a top price package. I did not give her a discount. And it's interesting because that person could afford it, but sometimes I have individuals who are quite wealthy who say they can't. So it's not that we can't do things, it's that we're choosing to do things based on the level of importance to us, right? So if it's important to you, you make it happen. You figure out how to make it happen. And so the more that you're actually connecting with what's truly important to you, the more that you're setting goals around those things in particular, guess what? You're going to make those things happen. And this is, again, where that self-reflectionary component comes in. And it's cool because you can take a look at already how you're filling your day, how you're filling your time, right? What you love to invest the most time in, what energizes you the most. And then I love to just do more around that. The more that you're spending and investing your time in things that you already know are fulfilling and inspiring to you, the more that you get the insights on what's the next step for the next inspiring, fulfilling thing. And sometimes I'm like, man, I know that there's something else in this, but I haven't quite gotten like the next step yet. I'll just ask that question over and over. I'm like, okay, what is it that I'm meant to do with this? What is it that I'm meant to do? I can't be putting this much time and energy into some of these things and for it like not to go anywhere. You know, I think about that. I invest so much time in some stuff that I don't even talk about on podcasts. And I'm like, there's no way this is going nowhere. And I keep asking that question. All right, what is that? Like, what could I do with that? What is that? And I keep filling my life with it because I love it. And then eventually bits and pieces of the answers come through and I might get a tear of inspiration. I might get a tear of gratitude, right? For like that insight. And I'm like, yeah, go time. I'm going to work on that. And another fun thing to do to understand what inspires you is if you do listen to a song and you hear lyrics that are inspiring to you, if you watch something, like I had a friend and she was just watching something on sports. She loves working with athletes, by the way. And she was listening to how like they had a coach and helped him get into the Olympics. And she just burst into tears. That's so inspiring to her. And she works with athletes and she's like, girl, that's my next goal. She goes, I'm definitely going to work with athletes and help them get to the Olympics. She goes, I want to do that. Right. And so she took this inspiring moment and she gave herself permission to say, I want to do that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to get it done. You know, I had a client one time who their friend finally had a kid, and she burst into tears. And she's like, Carly, it just was that moment was she finally gave herself permission to be the mom she wanted to be. And I was like, all right. I was like, that's great feedback. I said, you've been thinking about being a mom. And she's like, yeah. And I was like, let's get that on the list. And then we just focus on that. And that's the goal. How can you become the mom you would love to be? And that's part of your destiny. So pay attention to the feedback your grateful emotions, your inspired emotions are giving you as well, because that's telling you like part of your destiny, part of your path.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you said is really about knowing yourself very well and having that self-reflection, and also having blind spots that you're not necessarily aware of. So it could be, for the example you mentioned a minute ago, where somebody says they haven't got enough money and it can feel like there's just excuses to not do things. What's a good first step to make sure you've got a good self-reflection and know yourself well?
Yeah. Well, fun enough is like, what are you spending your money on? Like, let me look at your monthly expenses. If I broke down your monthly expenses, what does that look like? You know, some people genuinely are spending the most money on their house, but why are you doing that? Is it because you love beauty and you love architecture, you love art, and you want your space to be curated? Is it because you have a family and it's more important for you to have this dynamic for your family, right? Like, I don't spend the most on my mortgage. I don't, because I actually love personal development more. If you look at my finances, it shows you I want to learn, study, I want to grow. And I spent much more on that. And you could look at me and say, wow, you could live in a way bigger place, a way nicer place, closer to the beach, Carly. But it's like, I don't want that because I love investing in all of these other things. These are important to me. Your savings, right? I put a certain amount in savings every month and I'm increasing it like on a regular basis. That shows me that my long-term wealth is important. That's important. What is genuinely important to you? Check your bank accounts. It is very obvious on what you're investing your money in, and then ask yourself why, right? The why you're doing that. And you'll pay attention and you'll see that there's some patterns. There'll be the same things that you wake up every day and you want to spend your time on. No matter what, no ifs, ands, or buts. You'll procrastinate on something else to prioritize this thing that you. I have a client too. She's really brilliant doctor, really brilliant. But at the same time, that's not the only thing that's valuable to her. And she loves aesthetic. And so for her, she'll procrastinate sometimes on the study and education just to get something organized in her house or like decorated or like fixed up, right? And then she'll finish and she'll be able to study and be more present with the information. And it's like, are you procrastinating? No, you actually were focused on the thing that was top priority to you. Pay attention to what you're really doing, not what you think you should do or you think you need to do, but what you invest your time, your money, your energy in, what inspires you the most, what you love to talk about the most. And that's going to show you evidence of what's truly valuable in your life. And then we invest more time in it. And you say, great, how can I schedule this in and fill up more of my life with it? And the reason why I say schedule it in, right, is because if you don't schedule it in, something else will come in and fill up that time. And the truth is it's more important to you than you're willing to admit. You know, if it's that important to you to sit down and read a book, you better schedule that in or someone's going to come in and take that time. And I make sure that people know, like, that's my time. That's important time. I'm not going to give it up. I know you don't think it's valuable, but to me, if I give that up, we're going to have some issues. I'm going to have some issues. I need my 30 minutes, you know?
Yeah, but yeah, no, I'll have exactly the same for me. It's the gym and the spa. That's my time. And it just, everything feels so much better. Just psychologically, I'm feeling much better, sleep so much better. And it's just one of those things that it's important. You need to put that time aside. I'm fascinated that you've mentioned about spending quite a lot on personal development. For somebody who's working in that field, what things do you do to foster your own mental well-being and mindfulness?
Yeah, for sure. I love taking courses. So I'll take a lot of courses, I'll constantly take things, not just in personal development world, but also things that I know will help me balance perspective, educate me on things. I mean, I just all the time, even with my clients, like my client will like have something or think of something. And I'm like, if I know more about that, I can get him to the other side on this thing. And then I'll all of a sudden take a course or get a certification. I'm a little crazy with it, but I love it. Right. And so it really depends on the circumstances of what I'm trying to do. And I might be taking a more advanced course on education. I've taken courses on astronomy. Like, it's just wild. I love it so much. I perceive that that is linked in my brain, that that's going to help myself or my clients or my business or even my family. Like, I'm like, it's go time. Right? It's go time. So,
Yeah,
but again, it's just me. Yeah, it's me giving myself permission to do things I love. And then at the end of the course, sometimes during the course, I'll judge myself because we all judge ourselves. And the brain noise come in. And it's like, I can't believe you signed up for this course. Why are you taking an astronomy course? It's so dumb. And at the end of it, you're like, yeah, get it. Man, that was life changing.
yeah, I definitely subscribe to the lifelong learning kind of concept. And similar to you, I've done massage courses, sports and exercise nutrition, counseling, and yeah, I love the courses as well. So yeah, I'm definitely of the
Yeah.
same lifelong learning kind of mindset. So
Yeah, it's great you have a podcast, by the way, because now you can take that and use it in a
yeah.
valuable way.
Mm. What I'd like to ask you about, I know that you speak about
Mhm.
understanding your imperative language. Can you talk a little bit about what that means and how we do that?
Yeah, so our imperative language is indicative of us subordinating to that outside authority that we have perceived as well, where it's like, I need to do this, I have to do this, I should do this, right? And it's tricky because it can be really tricky. And it's funny because sometimes people will say, like, how do you spend your day? What do you do in the morning? What's your morning routine? And I'm like, it's none of your business because you shouldn't be doing that. According to me, it's doing what you would love to do, what you want to do, right? And I remember doing the shoulds, waking up and doing the shoulds. I should meditate. I should do the yoga. I should do the breath work. I was following the shoulds of a very particular person. And then at a certain point, I was like, I'm done with this. Why am I doing this? What do I actually want to do when I wake up? And shifting it around to my own schedule, which now I have this certain block of time every morning. And it's like, what do I want to fill that with? And sometimes I figured out the day I wake up, but I know what I love. And I'm like, this is what I feel like doing today. This is what I just feel like I want to feed my soul. Right. And making sure that you understand yourself and say, I love to do this. I want to do this. I choose, I desire to. That's all language that indicates it's coming from the authentic self. The shoulds, needs, have to, supposed to, got to, ought to. That's all coming from someone else. So it's important for us to catch that because that's when our comparisons are coming in. And when we get too lost on it, funny enough, we talk about failure. You're going to fail. You're going to fail. That's someone else's dream. That's someone else's goal. And so if you keep trying to do what you think you should do, you eventually set yourself up for failure because that's the feedback from the universe. Like, hey, you got off track here. Let's like get you back on track. What did you really want to do? What was the thing that you would love to do that you walked away from to do this should? And let's get you back over there. And so that's also part of the reason that we fail, which is kind of fun. It's just feedback.
But no, you know what, that's fascinating. You've brought that up, and I'll explain why. Because one of the things I do ask about is people's daily routines, and if there is something they do to set them up for the day to get them in a good mindset. And I think interesting to hear you say about that should do and copying other people. But I'd like to think of it as more of just a list, and then you pick and choose which things you like and which ones you don't, and just to give people options of what things are possible and what things help others. So I completely understand where you come from. I can start thinking whether I should be including that section now. So I might miss that question off for yourself at the end.
Yeah. And it's cool because it really is. It's like, what would work best for you? Every day I ask myself, it's funny, I do this like before bed too. Even last night, I just got home from a trip. I didn't unpack anything. I've been gone for 10 days. I didn't unpack anything. And I was like, well, I just felt like stressed. And I was like, I should unpack and get that. And I caught the should. And I was like, what do you want to do, Car? And I was like, I just want to go sit in bed and watch a show and cuddle with my dog. I was like, that's all I want to do right now. My dog for 10 days. I was like, that's what I want. I did it. I was like, feels so good, so much better, you know? And I could have woken up this morning and been like, I have to unpack and I have to get that sorted. And I was like, what do you want to do this morning? What is the top priority thing? And I was like, I just actually want to get on that audiobook and listen to that. And I was like, cool, let's hop on the audiobook. And so it's funny because we make these things so big in our head, right? I need to do this and I have to do that because it could be the smallest thing sometimes. It could be the end of the world that now my suitcase is open sitting in my bathroom still. It could be the end of the world. And it's who cares if it sits there for a week? What's the worst that's going to happen to me? All I'm doing is I got home, I just wanted to prioritize some other things. And I just check in with myself and I say, I think I should do this, but what would I love to do? And then I do the thing that I would love to instead. And I'll get to that suitcase at the perfect time. I know I will. And again, it's not that big of a deal. We make such a big deal about these things in our head. And the funny thing is if you just get connected with what you really love, you'll have more energy. I'll have more energy tonight because I did what I wanted to last night. I'm doing what I want today. I'll have more energy tonight and I'll be able to stay up later and probably get the suitcase unpacked just solely because I focused on things that energized me. Where instead it's not oh, I'm exhausted, I'm burnt out, I need to get my mind off of things and I need to relax, right? I don't have to say that because I'm making sure to focus on things that energize me, prioritizing things that are important, prioritizing what's important to me and the goals that are important to me on a daily basis. It's a lot of self-reflection, but again, this is coming from someone who had moved across the world to try to feel better. It's worth it. It's totally worth it. And I don't ever want to give that up now. It's not something that I want to give up.
Yeah, I think a lot of those things, not about what you should be doing, what you are perceived as the right thing to do, whether that's social media or just speaking to other people or listening to podcasts, and should empty your suitcase as soon as you get back and unpack. A lot of that comes down to fear of judgment and fear about what other people are going to think of you, which isn't an easy thing to escape. So what can you do to try and alleviate yourself of that fear? Because that's definitely an outside pressure, but it is down to perceptions. How do you release the pressure from yourself?
Yeah. If you look at the history of your life, people love and hate you no matter what. You could have done everything that you thought was right, and someone still is pissed off at you. 100%. And the more that you look at it and the more you see this evidence in life, the more that you realize it actually doesn't matter if I make you happy or sad. And you just were going to like or dislike me based on your own perceptions. And it's crazy. It's actually crazy when you look at that, because then it's if you're just going to freak out because I do this one thing and I have the suitcase out, chill, bro. What's going on inside you? What is going on? I'm okay with it. You're not okay with it. And I'll say that to people sometimes. They'll get really frustrated with me and I'll say, hey, I get that this stresses you out, but I'm living it and it doesn't stress me out. So I don't want to take on your perception. And I'll be like, thank you so much. And I was like, but I'm just, you do you, I'm going to do me, and you can stay mad at me. That's fine. So sometimes I'll share that dynamic with people because that's the truth. If it doesn't bother you and it bothers someone else, why are you taking on their perception? That's their perception, not yours. And so remember that too. It's funny because we don't even think about it that way until we say it out loud. And it's why am I doing that? And the other dynamic too is there is a certain level of people pleasing that's going to come in because people are important to you, right? They're really important to you. And so if there's a dynamic where you feel that there's almost butting heads between you and someone who's really valuable in your life on certain things that they're doing, let's say, what's a good example? There's one. Okay. I had a client who their partner went to bed really early and they were more of a night owl, and then they would sleep in and then their partner would wake up really early. So they were on different sleep schedule, and the partner was really frustrated because they're I can't spend as much time because we're on different sleep schedules. So I went through and I linked it for them to see how the varying sleep schedules actually help them in their own lives. And so then after that, it wasn't you have to do it my way or you have to do it my way. It was wow, actually, don't change who you are. You keep doing it this way. I'll keep doing it my way. And it's actually perfect that we have this difference, right? So if the differences in our perceptions are so extreme, you want to see how this difference serves your life and what's important to you on both sides. And that'll increase the connection. So then all of a sudden, if there is something, because there are important people to you, and then it turns not into people pleasing, but it turns into a win-win for your purpose and their purpose. Everyone can be different And sometimes you'll adjust, but it's like, but it's still a win because I did this work to see how me stepping into this every now and then actually helps what's important to me. So there's this dynamic of, again, if there's someone really important to you, we ask these quality questions to change the quality of our lives, to make sure that we see the connection that perhaps we haven't seen yet.
No, it's making me be reflective. And I think it relates to the example I was thinking about is somebody who's always on time, likes to get there early, and somebody who's a lot more relaxed and gets there late. So I think a lot of people will be able to relate to that too. But it's also in business, if somebody is very much strategic, likes to operate in procedures, likes to have things written down, and somebody is more taking action. So I can definitely see how that works in different dynamics. And I think it's also fine to be like, actually, we're not on the same agenda. We do think differently. And sometimes that might not be the right relationship, whether it's business or personal, to be in as well. And I think that's still okay, rather than trying to force things. But no, I think that's great to try and see it from the other person's perspective. So yeah, I think that's one we could all learn from. What I'd like to ask about is some of the behavioral patterns that you see entrepreneurs falling into regarding money and how they can shift to purpose-driven wealth.
Yeah. So there's a lot of dynamic, even with finances, where there's an unrealistic expectation on what it's supposed to look like, what it's meant to look like. There's also some inaccuracies that are shared, and I work with entrepreneurs a lot about this, where they'll connect with me and say, I have this friend, they started this marketing thing and they said they had $100,000 month. And I was like, okay, let's break down. What did they actually say about their $100,000 month? And all of a sudden it's $100,000 month for this year-long program they have. So basically they took in $100,000 for a product and service, an actual service that they're involved in that's going to last and span an entire year, with the opportunities for people to get refunds. They did not have $100,000 month. They did not. They had $100,000 divided by 12, assuming that there's no actual refunds. They took in $100,000 worth of deposits. Be really careful on all these comparisons of what people are saying and what they're doing. And people get really caught in this trap of like, I had the $100,000 month. I need to sign up for this. I need to sign up for that. And I'm like, no, let's check out and see what they're actually saying. Because if you break it down, you'll see most of these people are just talking about making like big deposits. And it was funny because after I realized that, I put myself in the pit for so long on this. I just looked and I was like, oh my gosh, I've had insane months. If I calculate months the way they're calculating, I was like, some of my months have been insane. But it's not actually that, and I just think of it logically. I'm like, my month actually wasn't insane. Those were packages like spread over a period of course of time. It's just that happened to be a month where everyone like topped up or paid for new packages, so it looks like a crazy month, but I'm like, that was not a crazy month, but everyone's like launching it as crazy. And I'm like, this is insane. Like just the way that people spin or word things. So be really careful. Like when you're reading other people's stories or other people's insights, like be really careful and try to read between the lines of what's actually being shared, because you'll get really caught up in comparisons really fast. And the other thing too that I see is like entrepreneurs saying like, I don't have enough experience. I don't have enough this. I don't have enough that. You forget that before you were an entrepreneur, before you were a business owner, and by the way, I see very established business owners get caught up in this, right? You have been doing things your whole entire life. Since you were a baby, my friend, she just had a baby. She comes over. We have a good laugh because we watch how this little baby is just training her left and right. And we're like, she's only like 4 months old and he's already on it. We have a good laugh. So even as a baby, you're strategic. Even as a baby, you're tapping into people's emotions and their behaviors. You're learning how to get what you want. You're making sales using your voice in different ways. You figure out how to get people to respond and react, right? You're doing this since you were a baby, an infant, and you forget like all of these skills that you've been nurturing over time. And it's funny because I was working with a client they've been in business for 30 years, very successful business owner, and they're transitioning into coaching, and their brain's like, how am I going to coach? How am I going to coach? And I'm like, man, I've been working with you long enough, like to know, I'm like, this is easy breezy. You coach everyone in your business. Half of the challenges that I've been working with, like with you to get you out of being a one-on-one coach with like hundreds of people so you can have time to build your practice. I'm like, what do you mean, how are you going to coach? You're just taking that into people who are paying for your services. And he had a good laugh. And he's like, He's like, yeah. He's like, I could do that. And I was like, you are doing it. And so we discount this history that we have, not realizing how much we've already done. So if you take a look at your life and all that you've been engaged in, you'll realize how much experience you already have. And everything that we're doing present day as entrepreneur is just adding on to that experience, And the other thing is learn like crazy, This is something where, again, just even getting organized and structured, my assumption was that all businesses at a higher end is now I work business to business as well. And so my assumption back in the day was all businesses like at the higher scale, like we're just doing really well, right? If you had hundreds of employees and you're making tens of millions of dollars, it was like, they must just have everything organized on the back end. They do not, they don't have values. They don't have strategy. A lot of time the culture's off, right? The execution isn't happening. They're not reaching goals to the degree that they can. They're not scaling to the degree that they can. They're unable to sell their business because the back end's such a mess. They don't understand their cash flow. They don't have the liquidity. They're going to get loans. And all of this I didn't learn until starting to work with business owners. And that's why I was like, man, I just want to start like helping them out with this and do business to business dynamic, because it's like, I didn't realize how many gaps there were. Because as entrepreneurs, we don't think that that's important, But when you're an entrepreneur, think about your business in the sense, if I were going to sell this one day, how could I make this business appealing for someone else who actually buys this business? And what would I do on the back end to create it in such a way that it becomes incredibly valuable for someone to purchase? Because it's not just about the profit. It really isn't. If you look at why people buy businesses, that's not just it. And so you really want to pay attention to that. And you'll find as you do that, you'll want to focus a lot more on getting that structure in the business, all these things that I got to go in and gut these larger businesses on. It's like, okay, let's get you started now on a lot of these structural components and make it a habit now. So then as your business grows, it's more organized, it's more fluid, it can scale up to a greater degree more effectively and efficiently. Yeah. So run your business like a big business, basically, and put in the structure now. As you grow it, you'll be amazed at how much easier it's going to be. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of what we're talking about is just really about being your authentic self. It's just listening to how you're feeling, acting on how you're feeling, and not comparing yourself to everyone and everything else around you. So in terms of what that can do for an entrepreneur, somebody in business, how does that change dynamics in the team?
Yeah. So that's an inspiring dynamic as well, because the person at the top is the leader of the company, right? So if they're off and their vision's off and their values are off and they're disconnected, you'll see the discombobulation flow down within the company because they're uncertain of their goals, they're uncertain on next steps. And it's funny, even if you don't have a long-term goal, you'll notice that all your employees come in and your leadership team and they're changing all the goals and we're switching things up and we're doing all these things because we don't have a place to go, right? We don't have a place to go because you didn't put in the time and energy to connect with where you really want to go with this company, what you really want to do, right? And it's cool because it's like once you get that connection, it really brings it into, like there's ways to bring it into the company that makes it not just a strategy and a system, but also like playful for the culture, playful for the environment, where you get people involved in these goals as a team and you get them committed to it. So then if you have a 10-year goal and someone's like, well, I think we should do this in 3 years, it's like, does that align with our 10-year plan? Does that align with our top goal, our BHAG, right? We call our big, hairy, audacious goal. Does that align with the BHAG? And it's like, actually, that would take us away. And it's like, okay, that's probably not our next best goal. Do you think we should change it now? And they're like, no. Whereas if you don't have that clarity, someone could come in and say, I could change it. And then you go a completely different direction in the company. So that's why we really, as entrepreneurs, business owners, want to get clear within ourselves so that becomes a strategy to implement within the company as our core values, our core vision, our BHAG. And we create the business, the strategies and systems around the vision for the long term.
And I think it does just breed that whole ethos of you're free to say what you actually feel and what you actually think, rather than feeling like they're unable to do that, which if people aren't being genuine, aren't being authentic, it can easily feel like you have to agree with what your leader's saying. So yeah, I think that's also another aspect to it is just breeding that psychological safety for everyone to say what they feel.
Yeah. Yeah. They say what they feel. And if they get rejected, they know why now. If they don't know your goal, your BHAG, and you're not sharing with anyone, and they come up with a great idea that's genuinely a great idea, but it doesn't align with the 10-year goal, and you just are like, no, and shoot them down, right? Now they're scared to bring something up because they're like, my ideas suck. As opposed to if everyone's communicating and everyone knows what's going on within the company and where you guys are going. So you said they'll bring it up and it's like, oh, your idea is actually awesome, but it doesn't align with what we're doing. Keep up, like bringing those great ideas to the table. Because if something aligns, let's go for it. And then that person, instead of feeling like my ideas suck because they don't know what's going on, is like, but just didn't go with it. Yeah, I could see that. Okay, how do I come up with a different idea?
But yeah, I've really enjoyed speaking very much about authenticity and mindset and developing yourself. If there's one key takeaway that listeners should take away from this conversation, what would you say that is?
Yeah, definitely be yourself, guys, and be grateful for it. Everyone else is taken and you don't want to be anyone else anyways. Like two people makes it obsolete. So there's a unique reason why you're here on this planet. You have a part to play in the whole. And so dive into that because that's inspiring and that's important.
I'm going to go on. There is a quick fire round. It's just a few questions really to look at how you develop yourself and things that have influenced you and built your mindset. So if you were to think about one book or one course that you've done that's had a significant impact on you, can you tell me what that would be?
Yeah, I was just laughing at this with my husband the other day because he's like, what book do you say when people ask? And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm like, which one? I'm like,
Yeah.
which one now? So yeah, like if I think, the one that came to mind is The Courage to be Disliked. I think that's a perfect one to talk about. Yeah, with what we've been talking about today.
Definitely.
And it's Kachimi, I believe. But it's a really beautiful book with a conversation between a philosopher and the pupil. And basically it's coming up with that courage to be disliked. So I think that's a beautiful addition.
Well, that perfectly fits a podcast. Yeah, that's a great answer.
Yeah.
And I know you've kind of vetoed the question already, but I'm gonna go there. So is there one thing that you do every day that gets you in the right mindset, just makes you feel positive and ready to seize the day?
Yeah, every day is checking in with my energy and my language. And so I am doing this on a regular basis every day and checking in to make sure that I am doing things that are inspiring and important and top priority for me. Because everyone gets stuck in their shoulds. And if I start to feel my energy drain and things start to go down and I start to feel stressed out, like I want to nibble or munch on food and stuff, it's like, whoa, what am I doing right now? And then I'll look and I'll actually say, okay, what do I really want to do? And when I tap into what I want to do, I realize, yeah, I actually want that because that is more of a priority, not just for me personally, but for my business. And I see how this is like the internal priority has shifted and it shifted really fast and I didn't write it down, right? Just based on circumstances. So pay attention to the energy and paying attention to that language to make sure that I'm on track.
Just the way that you do that is something you sit there and think about? Do you write about it, or how do you go through that process?
Yeah, if I'm feeling a little bit of that disconnect or discombobulated, right? Like I'll just take a break, which sometimes is me cleaning the kitchen. I'll just go in and I'll clean the kitchen, or it might be me putting the stuff away in the suitcase. Then I'll go downstairs and while I'm doing that, because it's a real remedial task, guys. We could totally think while we do that. Or I'll take my dog walk or something and I'll just do a remedial task, take the dog for a walk and just sit there and just be like, okay, what is it that I'm missing? And I just ask that question while I'm doing things that are second nature. You just don't need to pay attention to them. Yeah.
Perfect. It makes it sound so easy as well. So it does mean that you can do it any time, anywhere really. So it doesn't need to take hours. Anywhere. It doesn't need to be a lengthy, drawn out process. I think that's great to hear that you're doing the laundry or any of those everyday tasks. And in life or business, what's one lesson that you wish you'd learned sooner?
Yeah. Okay. Life for me, what's one lesson that I wish basically that everything is perfect the way it is. I had no idea until I started to ask questions. And I've asked it so many times now, even if in a moment I'm not acting like it's perfect, in the back of my head, I'm like, this is perfect. You haven't seen it yet. Like you're not seeing the perfection. And I might be really stressed out, but even just having that certainty to know that in the future, I'll see the perfection of what's occurring is a real game changer for me.
And the final question for me, what's one behavior change that you've made that has had the biggest impact on your life?
Yeah, it's one behavior change. I would say the eating disorder has been massive. Yeah, that one's been huge because that took up so much time in my head. Talk about like the seeking and avoiding. It was so much time around food and weight and body dysmorphia was insane. Yeah, so that's been a huge change to just get that noise out and be able to focus on life. Yeah.
Yeah, just in respect of the eating disorder, was there a particular thought process that you had that helped with that change, or was it just a collective focus on wellness?
Yeah. A bunch of things. There's a lot of time that was involved in this one because there's a lot of body dysmorphia. So I'm trying to get my body to look a certain way. So that was like coming to gratitude, taking that one look off the pedestal, taking the other look out of the pit, letting my body become more natural, focusing a lot on as opposed to because you get so used to like binge, purge, starve kind of thing. It was crazy that it was like, man, I got to learn like nutrition. Like I don't understand how to nurture my body. So it's been a really crazy journey of understanding nutrition and eating, and it's okay to eat fat. That was hysterical. I have another friend, she's got an eating disorder. I was like, we can eat fat. I was like, what? It was amazing. That was a big week for me. We're really okay and enjoying that lifestyle now where we don't feel like we have to starve. So it's just that, yeah, it's that different dynamic where your whole life is shifting from one thing to another and just being comfortable there. And then the other thing too is knowing that I feel like I crave food and I crave snacking if I'm not doing something that's inspiring to me. So if I'm craving food and I want a snack, instead of just going for the snack, it's like, okay, well, what am I doing right now that's not actually inspiring? And it's like, okay, let's just replace it with something that's more fulfilling and let's move on. Let's just move on. Mm-hmm.
No, it's really interesting. I think we spoke about looking back at how things in the past have affected the way you look forward. And it seems like some of the things you talk about, certainly education, so education about nutrition and how education's become such a big part of your life now. And also the comparison to others. It seems like two of those negative forces in the past have actually been a real driver for you and your success now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that's been fantastic insight into yourself, what you do, and how we evaluate ourselves too. So I've really appreciated you coming on, enjoyed the conversation, and thanks for being here. The final thing I'd like to offer you is just a chance, if people want to connect with you and find out a little bit more about what you're doing, connect with you, what's the best place to do that?
Yeah, head on over to West Coast Growth Advisors, and then on that website, you can connect with me directly. And then there's all the social media stuff as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you.